about family systems. And, Virginia Satir was considered the grandmother of family systems work. She came from a family, was raised up in Minnesota, came from a large family, very religious family. Her mother was just very religious. When Virginia was a young girl, she had an attack of appendicitis, and because of her mother's strict religious rules, she wouldn't allow her father to take her to the hospital. Virginia almost died, and the father did take her, and she did survive, and it was just things like that that happened, dysfunctional things that happened in her own family that planted a seed in Virginia Satir's mind that she wanted to explore what was healthy families and unhealthy family systems. And she literally made it her life's work. And then she had a client, she became a social worker and a leader really in the field of working with family members, family systems, and she had a client, and the client's name was Sarah, no, I'm going to get this in just a minute, Sharon Weisinger Cruz. She was married the first time, Weisinger, and then she married the second time, was Cruz. But anyway, Sharon was a client of Virginia Satir's. And she went to her, she went because she came from an alcoholic home. She had become the caretaker in the family, and her whole life had began to break down. Is the reason that she went to see this woman, Virginia Satir. So Virginia literally reshaped in Sharon's life, helped her tremendously. Sharon went back to school, became a social worker herself, and carried on Virginia's work. And she was a protege of Virginia, and Virginia developed this family model, this system of family systems coming out of dysfunctional families. And then Sharon just took that model and added her own expertise to it. And so in 1989, I went up to Rapid City, South Dakota, and trained with Sharon. And then in doing that 8-day training, I went up there thinking I was pretty healthy because I had been in therapy for years. I'd been to treatment. I'd been in a 12-step program and all that. And I went up there feeling pretty smug about that I was in pretty good recovery, So they taught us how to do family sculpting, and so much of the work that we do here at Shades, I learned from Sharon. And so one of the evening sessions, Dr. Cruz, who was Sharon's husband at the time, and they did a lot of good work together. Dr. Cruz was Betty Ford's doctor when she was in the hospital for alcoholism, and Dr. Cruz was the one that started the Betty Ford Foundation because of Betty Ford. But anyway, with the help of Betty Ford. So anyway, together that couple did a lot of work with family systems. So here we were the night, there's like 60 participants there, 60 of us doing the training. And so Dr. Cruz came to me that night and asked me if I would be willing to let them sculpt, like, the family, where sculpting is what we do here at Shades, where we role play and sculpt the family, how looked growing up, how it looks today, and what health might look like. So he came to me and asked me if I'd be willing to let him sculpt my family system at that evening session. And I was so flattered. I thought, of course, because what I made up was he thought I was so healthy, he wanted to use me as an example for those other poor folks, So he started sculpting my life that I came out of, the family system, which was very sick. Very sick. And then I made a decision that my life wasn't going to be like that, and I started making changes, and I went really to the extreme the other way, became very rigid in my parenting and all. So with Al-Anon in treatment. Like I said, I thought I was pretty well. And what I didn't realize when I was up there, I had traded my eating disorder. I was already I'm recovering from my eating disorder, but I had traded my eating disorder for work addiction. So anyway, he started sculpting my life without going into all of it. By the end of that session, he had used all of the other 59 participants there to show my busy life, plus he brought out the kitchen staff. Everyone in that facility was there to represent different parts of my life and how busy a woman I was, and why I was giving everything away. I didn't have much left to give. So through that, that sent me back up there to do work with Sharon and Dr. Cruz personally. And then from there, I went to a trauma unit down in Florida for 30 days. So I'm saying all this to say you do what you have to do to get well. When you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you make some changes. And I don't lose patience, but I always get amazed at how people think they can come do a 4-day or even 42 days and think, okay, I'm well, I'm done. It's not a done deal. It's a daily reprieve. We get a daily reprieve contingent on being in fit spiritual condition. And that's really, that comes straight out of the big book, but that's really what Virginia Satir's whole family system was based on, is spirituality. So I want to read to you what Virginia's, what she wrote about her own life and her work. It's just a quote I want to read to you, straight from Virginia. I believe the greatest gift I can conceive of having from anyone is to be seen by them, to be heard by them, to be understood and touched by them. That's what human beings are. We need to have someone to see us, to hear us, to understand us, and to be touched by them. And also, that's the gift that we can give others. Now, that is what is missing in a lot of family systems, particularly when children are raised. There's 5 different types of systems that when children come out of those 5 systems, it is can produce the same result as if children are raised in alcoholic homes. When children are raised where there's alcoholism, what the theory is anytime the energy goes toward one member of the family, when you come out of a family where there's alcoholism, let's say the father's an alcoholic, all of the energy goes toward the alcoholic. And then and it could be a man or a woman that's the alcoholic, or an eating disorder person. Any addiction will do. But let's talk about alcoholism right now. Let's say the father's alcoholic and his focus is outside the home. Even if he's in the home all the time, it's focused on the drug alcohol. It is focused on the disease of alcoholism. He has no eyes for anyone. And that's true for people practicing an eating disorder. So then the co-alcoholic, or the wife of an alcoholic, or the husband of the alcoholic, their focus is usually on the addict, trying to get them to stop, trying to get them, and I'm not proud of this. I always said I'd never marry an alcoholic, and I didn't. I married me 2 of them, but anyway, the last one we were together 51 years, and we got very sick together, but we got healthy together. And, my focus was entirely on getting him sober. We had a house full of kids, but, when he was out drinking, I put the kids to bed. I mean, as soon as supper was over, okay, get to bed, everybody get to bed. And the kids would say, but Mama, it's light outside, it's not dark. I wanted them out of my way so I could think and worry about the alcoholic. So I'd make them go to bed before sundown. And then what I would do is press my nose against the window of the front door and watch down the road, waiting for him to come home. You know, my kids were absent two parents. And then by the time they got good asleep, you know, around 11 or 12, if he wasn't home, then I'd jerk them all out of bed, put them in this old station wagon, and we'd go out looking for him. Now that doesn't make sense for kids. That is total chaos. So, so in alcoholic homes, the energy goes toward the disease. And mine is pretty exaggerated, but I've worked with a lot of other families where there's alcoholism, and I don't think you can over-exaggerate. The unbalance of the energy is what we're talking about. So I want to tell you, there's a healthy family system. When you see that little mobile, you know, that hangs over a baby's bed, it has all these little animals on it, it's all balanced. And that's how a healthy family looks. The energy is balanced. But when you pluck one of them off, if one of those little animals got sick or tattered or torn and you took one of them off, that mobile will go just like this. It goes to hell in a handbasket. And so and then everybody keeps trying to get back to status quo. They want the alcoholic back just like they were. So, because abnormal becomes normal, even if it feels unhealthy and chaotic, that's what the system knows. So when the addict begins to get well, you must treat the family system, or the system itself will do everything it can do to get the addict back in there so everyone will feel comfortable. They feel comfortable in their uncomfortableness, because we get used to being sick. And so when one person starts getting well, it upsets the entire family system. And that's why we here at Shays so believe in family systems work. So I get all charged up about this, because in dysfunctional families, like those 5 families that I was talking about, it's a given that there is dysfunction in alcoholic homes. And then, because the energy is going to the disease, it's not so much the addict, it's the disease that controls the family. Keep that separate. It's the disease. You know, I've never worked with an alcoholic yet that didn't love their kids, or any addict. They love their kids, but they have a disease that is so self-centered they can't see beyond the tip of their own nose. So, addict families. And then families where there's physical illness. Now that's where there's chronic illness in one parent. For instance, many years ago, when the day we opened the doors here, I had a young girl that she'd been in treatment in the other treatment center where I started the eating disorder unit. Anyway, the thing about it, I kept noticing and then she later went to work for us, so I kept noticing she had so many of the same signs and symptoms of someone that was an ACOA. There was an adult child of an alcoholic. But she denied that there was any addiction at all in her family. Come to find out, her father had been seriously ill with heart disease all of that child's life. And her little brother grew up in a quiet household. They could not make any noise. And father stayed in bed for many years. And what's interesting is after the children, when she was, years later, the father began to get well. But anyway, that's another story. But the thing about it, all of the energy went to the sick husband, the sick father. And then his wife's job was taking care of him. And so in a lot of ways, the children were abandoned, much like they were in an alcoholic home. Or if there is a seriously ill, chronically ill sibling, and all of the energy goes to the sibling, it's going to make that unbalanced in the family system. Another one is where there is where they are raised by strict religious principles. And where a lot of times in this family system, a lot of times, the father can even be not a priest, but a minister, and everything sort of revolves around him and the church, all of the energy is put, for instance, a minister is on call 24/7. Maybe the family's getting ready to plan, go on vacation, have everything packed up. The minister gets a call. Someone in his church has died. He stops the vacation. He stops and goes to heaven. So anyway, where that energy is all focused on the church and on the ministry. And a lot of times when people will bring strict religious principles into the house and try to raise their children under those strict religious principles. If you want to make an atheist out of a child, you do that. You try to push religion down a child. So it's anywhere this extreme energy goes, where children don't have a choice. And then another one that we see, because we're close to an air base here, but we have treated people that have been raised and where they have been raised by someone that, for instance, a father or a mother that have had an office in any type of military, and particularly those that are higher up, like lieutenant colonels, on up. When they've been raised in that strict military background, it is just like having an alcoholic in the family, because the kids learn to walk on tiptoes, they learn to be like little soldiers, and a lot of times it affects every child when there's that real strict military that's brought in. And so it's not just alcoholic families that have these systems. So what happens then is that children, it's almost like they get together and divide these roles up. But you can see 4 distinct roles in family systems of where there's dysfunction. There is a hero child, because when there's one parent that is the sick one, regardless of what the sickness is, then the other parent is focused on the sick parent. So there's no eyes really for the children. So that hero child is the one that makes the family look good. They look around and they will become the helper of the chief enabler, the chief enabler being the spouse. So a lot of times that hero will help the chief enabler take care of the alcoholic or the sick person. That hero child is the one that will get your name in the paper for high achievement. They will be your kids that stand out in school, and everything they do, they're going to be a standout. They put so much pressure on themselves to look good and be good, so that they'll not add any burden to the already sick system of the dysfunctional parent and the one that is focused on the dysfunction. So that hero child. And they also can become like a mini mother to the other children, or a mini dad, because they take on that the kids are not, younger ones need help. So that hero child will become a caretaker, and they grow up to be your dyed-in-the-wool codependents. They become caretakers, and they get their good feelings about themselves from being a caretaker. So that's your hero child, always looking good and making the family look good. And then this second child comes along while there's this dysfunction going on. This second child comes along, and he or she looks around, and he does not, let's say he's a boy, he doesn't want to be like Miss Goody Two-Shoes. He watches her life and thinks, that is too boring for me. I do not want to live like that. And what he does, he becomes the opposite, and it can be a girl, either one, but he becomes what we call the scapegoat. Now, the scapegoat, when you take it to, pretty exaggerated, this scapegoat will get your name in the paper also as parent of, someone that is selling drugs or stealing cars or slashing tires. This is the kid that gets you on first name basis with the high school principal. You know, they'll be calling every few days because of what little Johnny has done or didn't do. And so his job really, and he didn't know it, but the scapegoat's problem is to take the pressure off of the addict and put the problem on them. And so it kind of gives the addict a little bit. Every one of these jobs is to support the disease. Now, these kids don't know that, but this is unspoken rule. So this acting out kid is what we call the scapegoat. And then as the disease progresses, you know, what happens in alcoholic homes, there is a lot of problems in the coupleship, a lot of hollering and screaming, and then, you know, they'll get mad at each other, and then they have a lot of make-up sex, and then by this time they're so unstructured that they are, you know, don't use a lot of birth control at times, and so here will be another kid born into the chaos. And this other child looks around and realizes there is no place for them inside this chaos. And they become what we call the lost child. And they will go into their room, and they're the ones that will be in there playing video games. Girls will play lots of dolls. They will have their pets in there. They don't have live pets. They'll have stuffed animals. This is your child that pulls off from the chaos of the family and becomes lost. And that lost child will play that role into adult life if there's not an intervention. You know, for instance, here, when we get ready to call family members to come for Family Week, you know, they'll go through the list and maybe, you know, the list that the client's turned in, and then we'll get to look at it and realize that they have another sibling, and we'll ask about them. And invariably, they'll be the lost child. They won't even be called for Family Week because their siblings kind of forgotten about it. So this lost child plays that role if there's not any intervention into the behavior. Same with the scapegoat. They'll grow up and continue those scapegoat behavior, and same with the hero. Your hero a lot of times will marry someone, they'll marry an addict. They'll go toward what's familiar. You know, swearing they never will, but they'll go and find some dysfunctional person to try to help. So this fourth child, and by this time there's a lot of chaos in the family, and this fourth child, when this child is born, this child looks around and thinks this family needs to be lightened up a little bit. This family is way too serious. This will be your little mascot. This little mascot is cute, precious, and darling. A lot of times this will be the kid, will be your ADHD kid. This is the one that brings some levity to the family. You know, like the scapegoat will spill the milk at the table. The hero will get up and clean it up. The lost child will just not say a word. And the mascot will make a joke out of it. And so the mascot, you know, is always making a joke, and, you know, everything's fun. But on the inside, every one of these kids feel the guilt. They feel shame. None of them escape, because each one of these have a specific role. Now, if there's only one child in the family that is born into disease of alcoholism or codependency, that child will act out all four of these roles at different times. Now, if there's two children, they split them up, and that's true for 3. Now, if you have more than 4 children, bless your heart, but anyway, if you have more, then what happens is this cycle starts over. The 5th child will usually be the hero, and it goes on like that. So what happens in this type of system, the person that is going to get help first, usually, is the scapegoat makes so much noise. Let's say the scapegoat gets in trouble, and it's usually in trouble legally that will get the parents' attention. because the parents are over here. One's, the addict, the other one is the enabler, and they're over here in their own little cocoon doing the disease. And so when the scapegoat gets in trouble and maybe winds up in juvenile court, if it's a good judge, the judge will give the kid a choice, or the family a choice, of going to treatment or going to jail. And hopefully the family will choose going to treatment. So let's say the scapegoat shows up at treatment. And I will tell you, most of your scapegoats get tired of being a scapegoat. They get tired of having to act that out in every system that they're in school, in society. I mean, they get tired of it. And so you get a scapegoat early on, particularly before they spend years in prison and all, but you get a scapegoat in treatment early on, boy, you've got you a good client, because a lot of times they want to change. And, let's say in 3 or 4 weeks, we have a family week, and he wants his whole family to come. And so we start calling people to come to family week. Now, you're going to get that father, that alcoholic there. Now, we have to talk to him and tell him he can't drink or the mother, whoever's acting out, they can't use the substance while they're here, in family week. But, the alcoholic's going to show up because the codependent, that his wife, or if it can be reversed, is going to drag both of them. They are going to be here, and she's going to make the husband come whether he wants to or not. She's going to drag his ass here. So you can count usually on those two. And then we start calling. You call the hero child. And by this time, they're very excelled at whatever job they have. I mean, they are important, particularly to themselves, and the first thing they will ask us is, what are your credentials? How long have you been in business? Who will be doing the family work? What kind of family work are you going to do? I mean, they ask all kinds of questions. And majority of the time, they're too busy to come. And they'll say, well, if it's 4 days, well, I can come for day 3. Or I will come for day 1. I can't come the whole time. And then we say, no, if you can't come for all of it, we ask that you not come, because the treatment builds one day on another. And so they usually get very angry at us because we won't change the program for the hero. They want it just the way that they're very locked in to their thinking. But they're going to show up, I'll tell you, they're going to show up to make sure that we're doing our job. So then the next one that we call, a lot of times we'll play that mascot role, and they'll just be so tickled to come. I mean, it's a trip, they get to fly, they'll be excited. Oh yeah, I'm going to see my brother, they will be here. Now, we love the mascots because we have to watch. When we get a true mascot in treatment, it's hard for us to help them see that their humor is a wall that keeps people away from it. Because when you get a mascot, either in family week or in treatment, well, they absolutely entertain all of us. So as therapists, we have to back off and realize that is their way of keeping people away from them, and they're entertainers. And if you can get past that and get to the heart of that mascot, they are also tired. The kids who live in this system are really very tired. They're physically tired. They're emotionally tired. It takes a lot of energy to keep this sick system going. So the mascot is, we'll be cute, precious, and darling. And when we have them in family week, we have to really, and I hate to sometimes, we have to kind of calm down the joke telling. And, and once they stop, that's when their pain comes up. It will come up like that. When you stop a scapegoat a mascot from being, funny and telling jokes and making fun of the treatment and all that, once you stop there, that you can just see their pain. And that's what's inside of every one of these 4 roles, is a lot of unresolved pain. And then a lot of times we forget to call the lost child. But when we call that lost child, they are so excited. They will show up. They will show up. We had a family here, and without giving any names or anything, they were a very famous family, and one that we were treating was very much the hero, and then one was lost child. Anyway, at the end of family week, I invited the lost child to stay for treatment for 42 days inpatient treatment. And that woman, she was a lost child, and she broke down and started crying. And she said, no one ever has seen my pain. It's always been about my sibling. We've always done everything because of the sibling, because of my sibling. It's all about my sibling. And no one has ever indicated that I might need some help. I'll tell you what, she had to change a lot of things because she had a busy calendar. And she canceled her calendar and she stayed for treatment. And this has been many years ago, and I've never had a client to recover the way that young woman has and help so many other people. Now, this was a lost child, and we very much could have ignored her, but we saw her pain. We saw her withdrawal throughout the week. That is the role that she played, because no one ever paid attention to her pain. And my Lord, she had so much pain that it took a lot of work, and she was willing to do the work. That's another thing about the lost child. Once you recognize that there has been suffering with the lost child, they will do the work that they need to do to get well. So that is what the sickness looks like in those four distinct roles. Now, when you get a hero child, and they usually suffer from severe codependency, you'll also see the hero child with eating disorders. You'll see a lot of bulimia, anorexia, and some compulsive overeating because sometimes that chief enabler also has a food problem. Not all the time, but a lot of times. And maybe, the spouse, one spouse will talk about, particularly men, fathers will talk about their wives' bodies, want them to be a certain way. This hero child will pick up on that. So you find a lot with your hero children, you'll find a lot of eating disorders, compulsive overeating, bulimia, a lot of bulimia, and anorexia. And so then with your scapegoat, it's a given. You're going to find lots of, and with this hero child, when they grow up, you find lots of work addiction with the hero child. They try to get their worth out of their doing, and achieving. And so with the scapegoat, once you intervene on the scapegoat and they really get that they have an addiction, and they start treating that addiction, there is so much hope for a scapegoat. I mean, we see people, I've been around 12-step programs for 50 years, and we see so much success with people who are addicts. That once they get that they are an addict and they start treating it, oh my Lord, they can become very successful. Not just money-wise, but in their life, because they know that their recovery from their alcoholism is contingent on doing something every day. These are the folks that's going to stay around in a 12-step program. These are the folks that own, Thanksgiving, and everybody's there, and maybe everybody's having a good time, and maybe the next day, this is the one that will, you'll see them, and my husband was a perfect example. The kids and them may be playing 42, and he'd reach back in by his chair and pick up his big book, and he'd say, okay, y'all have fun, I'll be back after a while, because he'd be going to his AA meeting. I did the same thing with my OA meetings. I mean, if there's a meeting that fell on a holiday, I would be there. And it makes your family mad a lot of times when, they'll get mad when, an addict starts taking care of themselves, and they'll say things like, well, ever since you've been out there at Shades of Hope, you're just so different, and all you want to do is go to those meetings. That's why the whole family needs to be involved. So here we go with the lost child. When a lost child, and what they usually suffer from also can be eating disorders. A lot of your compulsive overeaters, your morbidly obese, are lost children, because they'll get in those rooms and hide out, and they eat, and they use games, and they sit around. They don't get a lot of energy. But also about the lost child, if you really want to know what's going on in a family, you ask this lost child, because they watch everything. They know what's going on. But people seldom think to ask the lost child what's going on. But what can happen to the lost child, once they are noticed and they begin to get into recovery, oh my God, they blossom. They absolutely blossom. And then you look at your little mascots. When they get in recovery, what happens is they grow themselves up. Because a mascot they are stopped in emotional growth. They are stuck in emotional growth. They may grow up and can hold down jobs and all, but they are never taken serious because they will joke about everything. Recovery for a mascot is they begin to grow themselves up, and they still keep that humor, but they don't use the humor to keep people from knowing it. Your mascot is also going to be your artist. They're going to be your creative people. They're going to do, they shine in recovery. All four of these people shine in recovery, but they all four have to have their own intervention done to them. They all have to be willing to get some help in recovery. There is in every system, family system, particularly when it's an uneven system, like I've gone over, that energy is focused on one, either physical illness or addiction. That's when those distinct roles show up. So I want to share this. When you're raised in and when you're raised in, I'm going to tell you this first. Virginia Satir had four goals to change this model. This is her 4 goals. And this is what we attempt to do in treatment every day with our clients. The first thing in working with kids that have come out of this type of system is raising the self-esteem. Children who are raised in this type of system usually have low self-esteem. Now, a lot of times you'd hardly know it because they overcompensate and they can accomplish a lot. But on the inside, they have low self-esteem. So the 4 goals that Virginia had is to help clients raise their self-esteem, and then helping them to boost their decision making. Because when you're raised in a dysfunctional home, that decision making a lot of times is not given to children. They are told what to do instead of taught what to do, and then let them make some of their own decisions and suffer the consequences thereof. We only learn from our mistakes. It'd be wonderful if we ever did everything perfect, but we're not going to. A good parent will teach a child how to ride a bicycle, and after a while the child will say, turn loose, turn loose, turn loose of the seat. And then the kid will start riding off, and all of a sudden they'll fall off their bike and have a skint knee. And if that parent will leave them alone, you'll watch that kid get up, get back on the bicycle, and try it again, and then try it again. That's healthy parenting, instead of rushing up there and trying to prevent a bicycle wreck. Unhealthy parents try to prevent kids from going through problems. And if you do that, what you're denying your child is the dignity to learn how to problem solve and how to make healthy decisions. And then the third thing is kind of goes along with that is becoming responsible. let your children become responsible for themselves in small ways when they're little. For instance, let them pick out what they want to wear to school. Real strict, rigid mothers, you can go to school and find out the kids that are strict. And I was one of them, because how my kids looked was a definite reflection on me. And I lived for the compliments of people saying, oh, your children look so beautiful, because I would dress them, I'd lay their clothes out at night, and I wanted them to look perfect. And thank God they finally started revolting against that. My little scapegoat, Kimberly, what she would do is she would put on other clothes underneath. She'd put on old t-shirts, whatever she wanted to wear to school, she'd put them on underneath, put that dress on top. She'd roll those blue jeans up. She'd get to school, take that dress off, throw it in the locker, and she would be dressed the way she wanted to be dressed. And so it is being so strict on how your children look. You know, as parents, I hate to say this, but a lot of what our kids do is none of our business. Train them up, teach them how they need to go, and then give them the freedom within some boundaries. You know, what I talk about is raise kids like the rancher raised calves. You know, you have a calf, you know, calves, at this time of the year, they're taking those calves off the mamas. They've had baby calves. The ranchers will take them off their mamas after a while. And, you know, they put them in a fenced area. A big fenced area with good green grass. There'll be a lot of little calves out there. They'll maybe do some supplementing, feeding, give them fresh water. And then the rancher says, now you can do anything you want to within this fence, but don't get outside the fence. The next morning he'll go out there, and those little calves will have their noses up under that last run of the fence trying to get the grass on the other side. And so what the rancher will do, he'll take his sticks up in a prog and push him back into. So that's how you raise kids. You give them some freedom. You set a boundary and say, this is what your boundary is. Now, inside this boundary, experiment. You know, do some things that you want to do. You know, keep them. A parent's job is to keep them safe. You know, we had a conversation yesterday, and we're doing a family week. I'm going to go over at 11 and help finish it. And one of the things is someone, when the kids was complaining about having a device in their car, a tracking device, and she was just all been out of shape about that. And I told her, I said, you know, in this day and time, if I had teenagers, every one of them would have a tracking device on them. Not that I don't trust them, but the things that happens to kids. My grandson, you know, he's 19, from what his parents say, they've had a tracking device on. They know, and he knows it, and they kind of laugh about it. My kids have put a tracking device on my car, you know, not that they, you know, afraid I'm going to go, you know, act out, but to keep me safe. So a lot of things that parents do seem unreasonable to teenagers, and actually it's about helping to keep them safe. So, and then, you know, so, you know, help them become responsible while allowing them to make their own mistakes. You know, for instance, and I was guilty of this, you know, procrastination. A kid would put off doing their homework. Now, I was real strict. I raised our kids pretty strict. You know, they came in from school, had a snack, did homework. And I still think I would do that if I was raising kids. And then they could play and do whatever they wanted to do. But if they didn't get their homework, then because I wanted them to do well in school, now some of them I never had to help them. But if they didn't get it, then I'd help them stay up at night and get it, not for them, but for me, so I would look good. Today, I'd let them fail in school because that's the consequence for not getting their homework. Parents don't need to be doing that homework anyway. I'm on to preaching. So help them to become responsible children, and then they'll become responsible adults. And then the fourth thing is achieving congruence. That means achieving some harmony and some agreement inside the family system. You know, some harmony. one of the things that sponsorship is so good, and I was so rigid with my kids, and my kids, were hating me. But I didn't know how to be a parent because I didn't have healthy parents. And I got no discipline, nothing. I had to discipline myself. I'd ground myself so I could tell my friends I was grounded. Kids want to be disciplined because discipline equals love to them. So anyway, I grew up and I became a parent that set out so many guidelines I couldn't live up to. I was very strict and rigid. I'd get at the bottom of the stairs and, scream up, and we had 7 kids, bonus children and 4 little ones. And I'd scream at them to get up and go, get ready for school. And I'd be hateful and ugly to them and be fixing sandwiches. And anyway, it was just chaos in the home. And I had a sponsor. She started me out doing a morning meditation. She told me to do 5 minutes. I couldn't still my mind long enough, 5 minutes. So I did 2 minutes and then 3 minutes. And I began to get a little better and a little better. My behavior was beginning to get better. And this was, 3 years later. It took me 3 years later to get a little better, but it was little by slow. And one of the things she recommended, she said, start playing cheerful music in the house, in the kitchen of a morning. And I did that, and it shocked my kids to death. They thought I'd lost my mind because I was changing the pattern. And they would just kind of go along with it. And then I wanted to be a tap dancer. So I started doing a little tap dance for them. And, here I weighed 280 pounds and a big old house coat. But I'd do a little tap dance. I started laughing with my kids. I started breaking some of those strict, rigid rules that I had. I started lightening up a little bit. Every morning when the kids would go off to school, the older ones, my 3-year-old baby, I would pull her up in my lap and I'd read my little meditation books to her. It started out with 1, and I had 3 or 4, and then I'd read her a little book. That was our time together. We did that every morning, and I got consistent with that. Consistency is what kids need. It's consistency. So one morning I overslept, which I very seldom have never overslept, but I overslept that morning. I got up, hit the floor. She also she said, before of a morning, you get on your knees and you invite God into your day. Make conscious contact with God before you make conscious contact with people, and you're less likely to fail at the day up. So I didn't do that. I was in a hurry. I had to get those kids up. I didn't invite God into the day. Hurried to the bottom of the stairs, screamed at them like I had before. They came down. They were scared again. I was in there slapping sandwiches together and making breakfast. And all of a sudden, I felt a little tug to my house coat. And I looked down, and there was Christy, Kay, my baby, holding up I had a little denim bag that my sponsor had given me that had a strawberry applique on it. She was holding that bag up that had my meditation books in it. That baby didn't know really what was in that bag. She just knew that when her mother sat down and took that bag and read what was in there, that her mother was a better person. If you don't think that your children notice what you do, you've got another thing coming. And as you recover, they may not like it. Do it anyway, because you're changing that system. And as you change, they, like I said, may not like it, but they will want you to continue on that path, I promise you. So, I want to just say real briefly what controlling parents, if you want to be a controlling parent, this is what you're going to produce. Being a controlling parent is being a perfectionist. And if you think you can be a perfectionist and be a parent, you are sadly mistaken. If you expect perfection out of your kids, you are absolutely abusing your children. And then always knowing what's best. If you think you always know what's best for your child, they're going to teach you different because they're going to rebel against that. Ask their opinion. Ask other people's opinion. Don't always think you know what's best. And be willing to say when you're wrong. Another thing is having unreasonable expectations. don't put your childhood failures on your kids. If you didn't play sports, don't demand your kids to play sports. Don't expect A's, and that's your child's work. That's not yours. Unreasonable expectations on your children. And then controlling the kid's life makes them feel not good enough. If you want to produce children who don't feel good about themselves, try to control everything in their life. Because when you do that, they will feel like that they have never accomplished anything and they can't do it right, and they'll grow up with lots of resentments and on the inside feeling not good enough. And these will be your overachievers. They will be a lot of times your work addicts, or they'll go the other extreme and never work a day in their life and become some form of an addict. And then passive parents will not become involved in decision making or conflicts, preferring not to rock the boat. That is just as dysfunctional as the other extreme. When you're a passive parent, you'll sit back and not want to rock the boat. You won't want to hurt your children's feelings. Well, bless your heart. Stand up. Take some, take a role in the family and have a voice with your children. And it doesn't need to be a loud, angry voice. Your children are going to hear, when you talk the softest is when they're going to listen the hardest, and that's when they're going to hear the most. So, you can tell I have a lot of energy around family systems. And if you can get in, as a treatment team, if we can get in and work on that family system, we've got the client. Because as the family system changes, the client will either change or they will get sicker. But every person in the family system needs to have the opportunity to recover from whatever, whether it's addiction or codependency or whatever they ever grow up to be. And let me end with this, is what Virginia Satir said. This was her theme. And I've said it millions of times and not even realizing it was Virginia's theme. Is love is the most powerful force on the face of the earth. Whatever you do with your children or your employees or wherever, do it with love. Now, sometimes you have to do it with sternness, but do it with love. And then treat your children with love, dignity, and respect. And treat your spouse with love, dignity, and respect, whether you're together or not. If you have children together and you're a divorced parent, you treat that other parent with love, dignity, and respect, because that's what your children are going to watch. They're going to learn by watching you. So, I haven't left much time for y'all to talk. I've got to go and finish the family week here in a few minutes. But does anyone have anything to comment on or say before we go? I've given out a lot of information. I've, kind of gone to preaching. Anyone have anything they want to say? Bill.